Hi, good morning, everybody. I wanted to talk about something that came up on Twitter recently, a discussion I had with somebody about it's interesting how we get down what we call these rabbit holes, right? That's the term that people use now. And it's funny, we'll use that term. And it's also Minashamayim that when I searched, the reason why I use this video capture, the screen capture thing, is because it uses less memory than the regular camera, even the smallest memory, and I wind up filling up the phone. And also it's easier to upload, it's easier to download, it's easier to share if it's a smaller file. And I looked up on Sfar Darkei Amori, and I found, Rabbi Nachman's Chusig Elenu Solomon, a glaring fight against Darkei Amori. And so I want to get to this point. So anyway, we were discussing a different issue in Halacha. There's a very simple issue that's become complicated recently because of politics. You can look at my Twitter feed, you might find it. Ein kan mokum laharachba, because this is not the place to talk long about that, because I'm a person who will talk long about all kinds of subjects. It's not a good idea for the moment, because I want to keep this short. I want to get back to what I was looking at, and also it's Netzach Chama. I should probably say Kriya Shema, even though I said it a half hour ago. Now's the right time to say it. I'm in the middle of saying, you know what, I can pause the video and say Kriya Shema. How do I get to the pause thing? There we go, pause. All right, good. The other thing about this is easier to. I guess I could pause in the other camera, but anyway, and it's good. I hopped around a little bit of Rebbe Nachman too, which is the negation of what I'm saying here, but nonetheless, I think it might also not be the negation. So we'll talk about that in a second, though. But anyway, I had noted, and this time we weren't directly talking about Zionism, which tends to be a subject that people like to argue about on Twitter, and I tend to be somewhat of a gadfly about. Rather, we were talking about Geirus, which is a big Indian for Rebbe Nachman. Anyway, we'll put that aside for now. It got to the point where, I had said, basically, the idea that Geirus should take a long time and that Geirus could be overturned and all these other things, I didn't get into all the details, came about, maybe 130, 140 years ago. And even that, really, it only started to really change much more recently than that. And the person said, well, the things change. And he said the Hasidic movement also is relatively new. And I answered back, it really isn't new. One of the things one of my Rebbeim, Rabbi Siegel's Olgazun said is the Baal Shem Tov never started a movement. And that really opened my eyes to a lot of these things. And it's really true if you look historically. Maybe you could argue that the Maggid started the movement. The idea of it really being movementary is really more of a Chabad thing than anything else. Because, especially, you look at the traditional communities like Satmar, Belz, Babov, it was much less about Hasidus as much as this was just really the way things always were, for a long time. Maybe not always, but, that long before the Baal Shem Tov, hundreds and hundreds of years before the Baal Shem Tov. The only major difference was the change to Nusach Sfard. Meaning people wore Streimlach before that, people wore Gartlach before that. and even Nusach Sfard, of course, predates the Baal Shem Tov. It's just that a lot of people switched from Ashkenaz to Sfard. And but the thing is, a lot of the things that we look at today, and this was my point that I brought out. If you read, there's a Sefer Minhagei Vermiza, right? Talks about the Minhagim in Worms, Germany, and the Minhagim in other parts of Germany. Some of in the footnotes there, they talk about how things were different in other towns, in Frankfurt and so forth. But anyway, the statement that I've made many times, and I'll continue to make, is that Worms in the 1500s, 1600s was a lot more like Williamsburg today than like Washington Heights, meaning that the Hungarians held on to the old Ashkenazic traditions, and you had some communities that still held on to davening Ashkenaz until quite recently, and most of those switched over to Sfard maybe in the last 20, 30 years. And like I heard that Rav Yitzchak Lebovich Shlita, who's I consider to be one of the Gedolei Ador. I know some people are uncomfortable with him because he's maybe a little different, but he started daven Ashkenaz actually, as what I understand, at least on the weekdays, and only on Shabbos he davens Sfard, which is actually very interesting to me. But in any event, and one of his community members who I'm friendly with, and I don't talk to him as much as I should, he said he started davening Ashkenaz all the time, and he stopped wearing a gartel, and he's still wears a beaver hit and the rekel. But in any event, the truth of the matter is, so-called Sof, most of what we consider to be Hasidic really predates Hasidism, including Nusach Sfard, And there were a lot of people who didn't really identify clearly as Hasidic who davened, a form of Nusach Sfard. Rav Nosson Adler would be a big example. People wouldn't really consider him to be Hasidic. He didn't go to a Rebbe, right? But he was essentially, from our Chotzer, we would look at him as more of a Rebbeisha figure, and even if some of the other Chatzeris, they wouldn't see it like that, and the other Hasidic courts. So the one thing I forgot the name of there was a rabbi. He was somewhat in between Orthodoxy and Masorti, like conservative movement in England, and he was actually brought by the last one who called himself Lubavitcher Rebbe to testify at the court, with the whole Heitevis Dida Notzach thing with the books, and as a expert witness. Don't remember his name, Lewis something, I don't remember. Anyway, Newman? I don't remember the name offhand. Anyway, he said actually the Hasidus, as we know it, goes back really to the Maharal. And the style of the Maharal certainly influenced the later Hasidic movement. And again, I'm looking at my ancestor. The Maharal was my ancestor also, but like from his progeny, also my ancestry, the Chavos Yair was someone who, we have so much of his Sfarim, and his derech. To me, when I read his Sfarim, I see much more of what you would see in San's what you would see, and certainly like the minhagim that are mentioned in Minhagim Bermiza, that he discusses in the way he discusses back and forth, and the types of just the cultural way things went on there. It strikes me much more like Williamsburg than Washington Heights. I'm not putting down Washington Heights. I have tremendous respect for Breuers, for the Washington Heights community. And when I say Washington Heights, I'm not talking about YU, I'm talking about Breuers. But that's what I'm saying here, is that it just, again, nothing wrong wearing a tallis before you're married, but it was not the minhag in Worms and in other parts of Germany to wear a tallis before you're married. That's a new thing, which is fine because that's really the ikar din, that's what you're supposed to do, but we don't do it, and there's a reason why we don't do it. It's mostly a Kabbalistic reason, and nonetheless, this is what we do, right? We don't wear the tallis before we're married, and Worms in the 1500s, 1600s, the Bachrim did not wear talesim before they were married. Now, they got married pretty young, probably, So, like, again, we were talking about Rebbe Nachman here, and he got married right after his bar mitzvah. He passed away when he was 36, right? 36, and he had grandchildren who he was able to have a conversation with. So they were at least 3-4 years old that when he passed away. So that means he was a grandfather in his 30s. And in our circles, you're usually in your 40s before you become a grandfather. But that's kind of the world we're in. It's common in our circles to have children who are younger than your grandchildren, right? Than your oldest grandchildren. Once in a while, some families, especially you're getting married when you're 18, 19, 20, right? So, in any event, let's just get back to what we were saying. So the retort that this person gave, which is a good retort, is that, well, there were a lot of superstitious practices that are forbidden that people used to do in the old days, and kind of grew out of that stuff. And so, because like my point was that what we consider to be Hasidic is really pre-Hasidic, and the things that we and there's very little that we really don't know really anything from the Baal Shem Tov, except Psalm 107 before Mincha. That's pretty much it. There are even those from a Fakpek on the letter, right, to his brother-in-law Gershon Kittiver, and he said, "Mosai Kasimar." I know, some of my Rebbeim consider that to be authentic, and some consider it to be a forgery. One thing that we did find historically was the tax-exempt form for Dr. Baal Shem that was in Polish historical records. It said Dr. Baal Shem, and so he was a doctor. So the whole rabbi-doctor business goes back to the Baal Shem Tov Kodesh, and that's going to get to what we were talking about here. And I think that's really where we're going to answer this question. So, and this fellow said, and this is really the whole point that I wanted to bring out here, is that a lot of these superstitious things that were popular are prohibited by Judaism. And he didn't get into the details why they're prohibited, etc. But that led me to want to talk about something that I wanted to talk about very much. And so therefore I think, this video is already 14 minutes long. It's longer than I wanted it to be. I didn't get to the point, so I'm going to make a second video to talk about the point that I wanted to bring out. So thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you made it this long, watch the next video. Thank you. Be well.